Hello and welcome to The World Now. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. The 66th summit of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is underway in Nigeria's capital territory, Abuja, with Mali, Burkina Faso, and the Republic of Niger notably absent. These three coup-hit nations have severed ties with the bloc, accusing it of unfair coup-related sanctions. Chairing the meeting is President Bola Tinubu. And Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye is to give feedback to the bloc on its mediation with the three nations at the previous summit. On the agenda are regional security challenges and the payment of community levy by member states, among other pressing issues. We have more in this report.
This is the 66th Ordinary Summit of the Authority of Heads of State and Government of ECOWAS. The session opened with a farewell speech for the President of Ghana, as the session was his last as the President of Nigeria. President Bola Tinubu described the peaceful transition of power in Ghana as a beacon of democracy for the region.
This gesture, as it happened in Nigeria in 2015, demonstrated political maturity and respect for the wish of the people of Ghana. Today, we have the man I'll refer to as Mr. Democrat.
ECOWAS countries are expecting a slightly improved average growth rate of 3.8% compared to 3.6% in 2023.
After the closed-door session, President of the ECOWAS Commission announced the decision of the authority to accept the withdrawal of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso and launch withdrawal modalities from January 29, 2025.
The authority acknowledges that in accordance with the provisions of Article 91 of the revised ECOWAS Treaty, the three countries will officially cease to be members of ECOWAS from 29 January 2025. The authority decides to set the period from 29 January 2025 to 29 July 2025 as a transitional period and to keep ECOWAS doors open.
As we move forward to implement the outcomes of this summit, let us remain united in our determination and steadfast in our commitment to the principles that bind us together as a community. I call on all member states to redouble their efforts in ensuring that decision reached here translates into tangible benefit for our citizens.
ECOWAS reiterates its commitment to the citizens of the community and says its decision to keep its doors opened for 6 months is in the spirit of unity and openness. ECOWAS says it is expecting collaboration to continue with Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso on border security and other forms of security, despite the approval of their withdrawal. The modalities for this will be contained in the contingency plan to be drawn up later on. Muya Thomas, TVC News, Abuja.
For more on the regional summit, I'm joined by a former member of the ECOWAS Parliament, Frederick Opare-Ansah. He joins us live from Ghana. Mr. Opare-Ansah, thank you for joining us on The World Now. Despite reaffirming their decision to leave ECOWAS as irreversible, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have agreed to a 6-month grace period. What are the chances of using this time to convince them to stay? And what strategies will ECOWAS employ to make this happen?
Thank you very much, Nifemi. And let me extend greetings through your channels to your august viewers across the globe. I believe we've had occasion to touch on these matters on this very channel before. And as I mentioned previously, the delay in taking action when the first coup d'etat occurred within the region, and also judging by previous posturing of ECOWAS in accommodating these things, meant that it had to really act with tact. And now when the numbers soared from just one country to three, then the balance had really become very delicate. This coupled with the influence of foreign powers within ECOWAS itself, and also amongst those three entities, having found a new international military friend, it made the whole situation a little delicate to handle. I dare to say that from the things that has gone on over the past couple of years that this thing has been happening, I am not in the position to have faith that we are going to see a return of these three countries into the fold of ECOWAS within the next 6 months or so that the grace period has been given. I think, just as when Britain gave indication it wanted to exit the EU, the time left is better spent on ensuring that the two new regional blocs, that is ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahelian States, would have to coexist in a friendlier fashion rather than using the period to try to convince them to come back.
You're saying they should be fine-tuning their divorce papers now instead of trying to mend the relationship. Absolutely.
These guys have, as you know, started having talks with Chad and Mauritania to have a 5-country bloc. Now, one of the key things which I expected would have driven them back to the bloc was access to the coast. But if they manage to forge a relationship with Mauritania, then clearly they have access to a coast. I was actually worried that it may even influence one of the coastal countries to also have a coup-hit and join them. But now all those fears and expectations are unfounded. Once they have a relationship with Mauritania, they have a vast coast, and they have now access to the coast and the
Absolutely.
ports.
There are questions, though, on whether the departure of these three countries could have significant economic implications for the region, though we've heard from them saying that they would ensure they have promised visa-free travel to ECOWAS countries, and we're expecting to see how that will play out in the coming days and months. But how do you see the regional bloc ensure that trade and movement among member states remain unaffected, and what support systems can be put in place for countries that will be most impacted by this?
Well, as I mentioned, the need for ensuring that we do coexist peacefully and seamlessly, even if we are no longer in one bloc, and so citizens would have free movement and all that. But by and large, if you look at the balance of movement and possibly even the balance of trade, you would see that a lot of that movement is more from the Sahelian region into the coastal countries than vice versa. Of course, a good number of our population use these as routes to try and get into Northern America and also Europe. So certainly that becomes a much more difficult channel for those who use some of these illegal routes. But if you consider that in Ghana, for instance, a lot of our onions, a lot of our tomatoes imports from Burkina Faso, and also transhumance, a lot of the nomadic herdsmen also move downwards into Ghana to graze their cattle and also to trade in that same commodity. And so the impact on us, I wouldn't say will be dire. Yes, certainly we would feel a little bit of this, but once you have the necessary trade pacts and whether they are multilateral or bilateral, once we establish that these things can continue, I don't foresee that it would really be a challenge. Yeah. Don't forget that the cause of this is really the governance type and style, a military government as opposed to a democratically elected government. Yes. That is the cause of the divorce. So I don't think that it's in the interest of these entities to cause their population to suffer by being intransigent over any kind of negotiations concerning trade issues.
They also have their economic prosperity to protect. These three countries you mentioned earlier have formed their own group, the Alliance of Sahel States. Time will tell what this means for ECOWAS and the region and its impact on the balance of power, for instance, in West Africa. But I'd like us to quickly consider what has happened. ECOWAS has been unable to halt the departure of these three countries. Do you think there are lessons that can be learned from this experience and how ECOWAS can adapt to prevent similar situations moving forward?
Well, I would say, first of all, do not let anybody underestimate the power and the strength of a group like ECOWAS. I have seen people comment about how ECOWAS over the years has not really done much, but that is not necessarily true. I remember during my time at ECOWAS, Morocco actually wanted to join ECOWAS and attended several of our summits and several of our parliamentary meetings, all in an effort to join us. Remember, when you take the over 200 million population of Nigeria, add on to Ghana and the rest, ECOWAS as we knew it, those 14 or 15 countries were having a population the size of the US. And so any country that is heavily industrialized and is looking for a market would always want to associate itself with this group. Now, when you take out these three countries, the remaining countries are not that poor, and the population is not also that impacted. So, by and large, the bloc is still quite solid. And I will urge the leadership currently being held by President Tinubu of Nigeria to deepen the dialogue amongst member states, reaffirm all the tenets that originally were put down as the bedrock of forming ECOWAS, and if necessary, reiterate same, engage the citizenry and let people understand what we all stand to benefit as a regional bloc. I have always maintained that once the sleeping giant that is Nigeria wakes up and puts on its royal clothes, the entire region would be carried up with it. I recollect I was young though in the 70s when Nigeria found oil, and the 60s, and then in the 70s when the construction boom started. The migration from the sub-region of professionals into Nigeria was nothing to joke about, if you are old enough to recollect, So once Nigeria finds its feet, it will carry the rest of us in the sub-region with it. And so there are good prospects for all of us, and we should do what we can to ensure that the region remains solidly united.
Absolutely.
One key thing that I expect to see is the consistent application of the rules of the community. If the rule is that you do not entertain military coup d'etats, then make no exception. As soon as it happens, employ the necessary mechanisms that it triggers. But in one instance, you will see regional heads trying to go in and negotiate and give these groups some time to hand over power to the civilian government. You can't appropriate and reprobate. It has to be clear. If you do not entertain, I remember issues in Gambia where Nigeria moved in quickly and sent a force on standby to ensure that the then dictator handed over power in the democratic change. That is more the kind of things that we needed to have seen. Yes, the nations have their sovereign rights. But once you've signed on into the treaties of ECOWAS, you've given up a little bit of that, and you've empowered ECOWAS, as it were, to take certain steps to ensure that the regional bloc also survives as an entity.
All right.
Now, perhaps we need to redraw the upper borders of ECOWAS and now look at how to strengthen security. You know, the proliferation of small arms from the northern part of Africa after the collapse of the regimes in Libya. And the issues in Tunisia and others brought a lot of small arms down into the Sahel area. And that caused a lot of instability there. It's even happened in the northeastern part of Nigeria with Boko Haram. And in Ghana also, we've had our own crisis deepened in the Boko zone, which is again the northeastern part of the country. And all this is because of the porous nature of these Sahel countries, which had such a vast and difficult border in the Sahara Desert that it was near and next to impossible for ECOWAS, as was composed that time, to be able to properly police. So perhaps this is a blessing in disguise. We need to now strengthen the upper borders of Ghana, Togo, Nigeria, Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, Senegal, to ensure that we minimize the downward travel of such small arms, because it endangers all our democracy.
We'll see how the stakeholders respond in the coming days. Quite a number of people are talking about looking forward to internal reforms within the regional bloc, major changes in the organization structures and policies, as well as decision-making processes like you've highlighted earlier. Well, that's our time. By the way, Senegal's president, Bassirou Faye, has been mediating between the regional bloc and the three countries. They say never, because you never can tell. Perhaps they can still reverse the irreversible. Frederick Opari Ansah is a former member of the ECOWAS Parliament. He joins us live from Ghana. Thank you so much for your thoughts on this topic.
Thank you, Diomaye. I appreciate it.